oppressed by many a foe that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe.
He took raw talent, ordinary men, and by the grace of God produced extraordinary leaders.
And I can't think of a better person to have the honor and to be the pioneer in being interred in this cemetery other than Elder Calvin Moseley.
The man buried in this cemetery is Calvin Edwin Moseley Jr., whose pioneering career spanned 95 years and showcased his many talents as a singer, musician, preacher, teacher, lecturer, administrator, and pastor. Oakwood College has named its religion department in his honor, a fitting tribute to a man known as the father of preachers. Moseley's parents, Lily Bell and Calvin Moseley Sr., were natives of the prosperous city of Demopolis in the state of Alabama. Calvin Moseley Sr. was a plasterer, one of the best in the business. Calvin Edwin Moseley Sr. and Lily Bell received the gift of their firstborn, whom they named Calvin Jr. Calvin's parents made him understand that he must have a sense of responsibility and should contribute to the family budget. Calvin practiced what his father had taught him, and by the age of 12, Calvin had mastered the trade, earning double the average man's weekly salary. In 1921, at the age of 15, Calvin's parents sent him to Tuskegee Institute. Calvin's parents provided a middle-class life and wanted even more for their children. The career they had chosen for their son was that of a civil engineer, but the closest option Tuskegee offered was an electrical engineer. However, the headstrong Moseley had a different track in mind. He planned to finish at Tuskegee and then head to Howard University to pursue a career in law. Yet all that changed at Tuskegee once Calvin met George Washington Carver. The image many have of George Washington Carver is that of a dedicated scientist and inventor, dressed in a white smock, fussing over his many experiments in his laboratory at what was then Tuskegee Institute. But the image of Carver that Calvin saw was very different. To him, Carver was a Bible teacher. Thus, Calvin Edwin Moseley Jr. was introduced to the Bible by one of the most productive scientists of the 20th century.
Dr. Carver took note of that. And he said to me one day, "Moseley, why don't you join my Bible class?" I said, "Your Bible class? What's that?" "Well," I said, "Yes, sir, I'll come. What is it about?" He says, "Well, now, I have a class that I teach in Bible. It's voluntary. And I'd like to have you come." I went, and I couldn't stop. In fact, it was my following Dr. Carver's Bible teaching that led to my becoming a Christian. And I was happy for that. And that led to my becoming a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, Carver was not an Adventist, but he was a fine Bible teacher. And I learned a whole lot from Dr. Carver's teaching Bible in his class.
How many people can say that Dr. George Washington Carver, the famous scientist, introduced them to the love of the Bible?
The parents of Calvin Moseley were devout Baptists who were constantly seeking to know God's will for their lives. This led them to join the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1922. That same year, they moved to Jackson, Mississippi. The following year, in 1923, Calvin attended a tent revival there. He was deeply influenced by the evangelist F.S. Kitts at this meeting. Calvin Moseley Jr. decided to be baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Calvin Moseley Jr. began his life of service to God. A critical turning point in Moseley's life came when Annanite urged him to attend Oakwood Junior College. 2 years later, in 1926, Calvin Moseley enrolled at Oakwood Junior College and joined a historic quartet composed of John Wagner Sr., F.L. Peterson, Charles Salisbury, and C.E. Moseley Jr. Calvin Moseley's long musical career as a singer and cornet player began at Tuskegee. There, he sang in a quartet and also taught himself to play the cornet. At Oakwood, he joined Oakwood's first extensive touring group and sang in cities all over the United States. At times, they were accompanied by several female voices singing as Oakwood's nightingales. Calvin Moseley continued his music ministry as an arranger for the Alabama Singers. Founded in 1931, with Calvin Moseley as its director, they sang hymns, ballads, anthems, folk songs, classics, and Negro spirituals that thrilled audiences from California's West Coast to New York's Eastern Seaboard. As they toured mid-America, in Chicago, Moseley met his wife-to-be, Harriet Slater.
During my father's early pastoral ministry, Mother was living in Chicago. She had completed nurses training at Hinsdale, Illinois, and she heard about some evangelistic meetings that were being held in the Chicago area, and she attended one of those meetings. And this is where they met.
Their friendship gelled and matured. He asked for her hand in marriage from her mother, Harriet B. Hall. Granted, they married in the same church of which her bride-to-be and mother-in-law were members. Since then, of course, their marriage produced two lovely daughters, Harriet Frances, or rather Harriet Ann, and Barbara Jean. And since then, of course, their marriage has been very exemplary, one of 65 years plus, and one of bliss and happiness, and a blessing to all who came into contact with them.
A life-changing experience led Calvin Moseley to a career in ministry.
Ella Moseley became a minister while a teenager, living in the city of Jackson, Mississippi. Having left Tuskegee, he was attending school in Jackson, but then there were some recruiters from Oakwood College who asked him if he would not join the student body here. In the meantime, he was working with his dad as a plasterer, and he recalls an experience of having been up on a scaffold plastering a home somewhere in that area and receiving a strong conviction. He said he actually saw in his imagination the second coming of Jesus Christ, and this impressed him to preach this message. In one setting, beyond that, he was in a church and the speaker did not arrive. They asked him to say a few words, which he did, and then of course he received approbation and support from others who heard him that he should seriously consider the ministry. Putting those two experiences together, he decided to register at Oakwood as a ministerial student, and he pursued his ministerial training from here, then to Emmanuel Missionary College, and from there the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary.
In 1932, Oakwood College made history by naming J.L. Moran as the school's first black president. Moran then recruited Moseley to join the faculty as a Bible teacher. Moseley was startled to learn that besides his full load of teaching, he would also serve as Dean of Men and the first black pastor at the Oakwood College Church. When Moseley arrived at Oakwood College, a formal department of religion and theology did not exist. Only a few Bible courses were being offered. Soon, Moseley became the architect of the Department of Theology and its first black chair. These changes were monumental, coming 2 decades before the Supreme Court ruling that outlawed public school segregation. It wasn't unusual for Oakwood to be ahead of the times in terms of social change. Student protest had prompted the Board of Trustees to desegregate the teaching and administrative ranks. These voluntary actions at Oakwood College came long before other college campuses were forced to desegregate under pressure from nationwide protest. Moseley chaired the theology department at Oakwood College for 17 years, from 1934 to 1951. During his tenure, Calvin Moseley trained 98% of the African American ministers in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The most challenging call that Calvin Moseley ever received came in 1951, when the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church invited him to join them as an administrator. Calvin Moseley expanded his role from being a mentor and teacher to also becoming a church administrator. He served the denomination as assistant director of the regional department, which oversaw African American congregations. From 1954 to 1970, Moseley traveled around the world as the General Field Secretary for the World Church. For 21 fruitful years, Calvin Moseley preached in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas, bringing thousands to salvation through his ministry, a ministry that continued beyond his tenure at the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Though Calvin Moseley's influence spanned the globe, he firmly believed and practiced that real ministry began at home with his family.
Our home was always spiritually based. We had family worship, usually in the morning and evening, and our parents would talk to us a lot about what it meant to live a good, clean life. My mother, often from the health standpoint, since she was a nurse. My dad, as being one who was helping others to learn to live a good Christian life also, and he always emphasized the fact that it was important for us as his children not to let the family down, not to let the family name down, and to encourage us to do the right thing because it was right to do.
My father tells the story that I actually taught him the real meaning of prayer. It seems that when I was a little girl of about 6 or 7 years of age that I developed a very serious kidney infection which resulted from not drinking enough water. I was in a coma, in and out of a coma for about 3 days, and my dad said on the 3rd day that the doctor said that fever has to come down. As a result, my father stayed up all night praying, asking God to spare my life. It seemed that in the very early hours of the morning on that 3rd night that a voice spoke to my father and said, "You want your daughter to live. What if she lives and ends up disgracing the family? Would you still want her to live?" My dad said that as he thought about that and reflected about it, he realized that he needed to really turn his eyes on the Lord and submit his will to him totally. So he prayed the prayer, God, not my will, but your will be done. At the very instant he prayed that, he heard my mother say, praise the Lord. And when he ran into the room beside my bed, he found that my fever had broken. Mother was smiling, and they realized that the crisis was over. This is something that has stayed with me throughout my life, and I have also prayed the prayer, Lord, whatever it takes to save me, do that, because I really feel the power of that kind of prayer.
So thank the Lord he helped us in that area.
Calvin Moseley was very close to his children, always calling them with terms of endearment.
Dad's favorite name for me was Bobby. And then occasionally he would call me Hun. Of course, he also referred to my mother as Hun. So it depended on what was happening as to who got called Hun. But then if he really got angry, I heard my full name, Barbara Jean Moseley. My sister was called Fritz. I'm not quite sure where that name originated, but that was a pet name for her.
Calvin was a doting father of the bride.
Actually, I met my husband my senior year in high school. He was a very serious young man. He was looking for a wife, and I was not looking for a husband. So we really did not seriously begin to date until my freshman year in college, and that extended into my sophomore year. And by that time, we realized that we wanted to share our lives together. So he played the traditional role and went to my father and asked for my hand in marriage.
I think it came to him as more of a revelation than something he had anticipated, because she was only a college sophomore in her second year. I was a senior. I had in mind walking across the stage and picking up my diploma and carrying with me from the college campus not only my degree, but his daughter.
Now, I had always wanted a church wedding. And when my father learned that we wanted to get married, he said, unless you finish college, I will have nothing to do with this wedding. But if you will finish, then I'll give you the church wedding that you're asking for. He said, if you really love each other, this love will wait. So we decided we would wait. If it was that important to him, we thought we would honor his request.
This intimacy that Calvin Moseley had with his family still floods the hearts and homes of his loved ones.
My fondest memories of my father-in-law, Elder Moseley, include his being in the presence of his family, his wife, his daughter, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren now, a setting in which he was able to express to us his appreciation to God for the privilege of living sufficiently long to be able to witness the fact that not only did his daughters become educated in Christian education, but also grandchildren and great-grandchildren. This pleased him because to him Christianity was not simply worshiping in the sanctuary, but also becoming educated in the Bible in the setting of the classroom. And to me, this was very impressive and represents the fondest memory that I have of him.
My fondest memories with my father actually took place out in nature. He was a lover of animals. Our house was surrounded with chickens and goats. We had a dog. All of these became a part of our life. We would search out a favorite tree that we really wanted for a Christmas tree. We would cut it down with Dad's help. We'd bring it home. He would make the stand for it. So this was just a tradition that we really looked forward to every Christmas. And to this day, it's almost as though it happened yesterday.
Though he is missed, the family waits with assurance.
I think it's just the reality that he's not here. When I think about him being such an active part of my life for all of my existence on this earth up until just recently, just the fact of knowing that he's not here, sometimes it just doesn't seem real. And I often pass the house, and I would see him sometimes standing in the window looking outside, and we would wave. I won't see that again. I would go in the house sometimes, I would see him sitting on the porch, swinging. That was one of his favorite spots over the last couple of years, watching nature from his backyard. And I won't see that anymore. So there are just a number of things that flood into my mind, and I just miss those things. But I look forward to the second coming of Christ and knowing that we will be reunited, because that's the last thing I really said to him. Of course, he didn't hear me, but I made a promise that, Daddy, I'll see you again, and you won't be in this state when I see you again. So I'm looking forward to that.
May the work I've done speak for me. May the work that I've done speak for me. When I'm resting in my grave and there's nothing that can be said, may the work I've done speak for me. May the life I've lived speak for me. May the life that I've lived speak for me. When I'm resting in my grave and there's nothing that can be said, may the work I've done speak for me. The work I've done, it seems so small, seems like nothing, nothing at all. But when I stand before my God, I want to hear him say, well done. May the work I've done speak for me. May the service I've given speak for me. May the service I've given speak for me. When I'm resting in my grave and there's nothing that can be said, may the service I've given, Lord, speak for me. The work I've done, it seems so small, seems like nothing, nothing at all. But when I stand before my God, I want to hear him say, well done. May the work I've done, may it speak for